COVID laws are helping the left to control information.
Mr. Reagan.
In America, we are required to wear masks quite a lot. Not in every state, not in every city, not in every circumstance, but in many places still masks are mandatory. On airplanes, for instance. Now, many people don't believe in masks. They don't believe that masks work. They point to graphs that show masks clearly doing nothing. A beautiful series of these graphs was published by The Federalist. These mask naysayers also point to graphs that compare places with and without mask mandates. Places without mask mandates often seem to do better. N95 masks might help, but nowhere have I seen N95 masks mandated. The mandate always seems to be throw a thin veil of fabric over your nose and mouth, and that does absolutely nothing whatsoever. And that indicates to me that the politicians mandating these useless masks have no interest at all in trying to actually stop the spread of coronavirus. So what do these mask mandates do? Well, masks, like many of the other COVID restrictions, have served to silence us. I will talk about that in one moment, but first, and I'm sorry about this, I have to sell you something. New studies show that by the time people reach their middle age, the body often produces less than half the collagen it did in their youth. Collagen is the main building block in our skin, making up 70 to 80% of it, and that's why we get sagging skin and we wrinkle as we age. Now, if you want to look younger, you've got to supplement with collagen. Supplementing with collagen, it will improve your skin's elasticity. It makes it smoother, more plump, and more youthful looking. But the right type of collagen is difficult, if not downright impossible, to get in your typical diet or in a typical supplement. You risk ingesting dangerous ingredients or wasting money on a diet that doesn't truly combat aging. And that's why I highly recommend healthwithreagan.com. This ageless multi-collagen is a powerhouse of the right ingredients to improve your youthful appearance very quickly and very effectively. Get my favorite multi-collagen for 51% off today by going to healthwithreagan.com or by clicking the link in the description below. So if they haven't helped stop the spread, what do these mask mandates do? Well, they've divided the country, that's for sure. You saw the emergence of the Karen phenomenon during the pandemic. Sure, it started out as a racist meme black women used to attack overly aggressive white women who demanded to speak with the manager, but I think the pandemic revealed that the ultimate Karens are those who demand that everybody wear masks all the time.
You don't care about anyone else but yourself.
Go away.
No, I won't go away.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Stop harassing me, okay?
Excuse me.
Honey, everybody's unhappy. I don't care. I'm not putting that on my face. I'm not going to. I'm a healthy person. I'm not crazy.
So there are the Karens, basically anybody who watches MSNBC regularly. And then there are the sensible people who realize that mask mandates are useless virtue signals by Democrat politicians to make it look like they're doing something. There are people in the mask cult, and there are people who think for themselves. There are Democrats, and there are Republicans. But masks have not just divided us. They've also served to silence us. Consider that this video will probably be demonetized, merely because I said some people don't think masks work. Well, that's a far more profound thing than most people realize. They're silencing political perspectives of those they disagree with. They will excuse this behavior by saying, well, it's for your own good. It's the same excuse that the violent husband makes when he beats his wife. We are all in an abusive relationship with social media companies. But if you think about it, masks silence us in a much more literal way. A mask is a physical barrier between you and those you may wish to speak with. We've all discovered that speaking with people in public is much more difficult with a mask. Waiters, car mechanics, co-workers, people at church, even the people that administer the dang COVID tests are incomprehensible under those stupid masks. Our ability to communicate face-to-face has been severely diminished. And it even serves as a kind of symbol of the silencing. They're literally putting something over your mouth. Remember like 10 years ago when like every nonprofit organization started marketing their charities with the duct tape over people's mouths? It was like an advertising epidemic of duct tape. I always laughed at those ads because they were so overly dramatic. But imagine replacing all that duct tape with masks. and then multiply it by a gajillion. And that's the world we live in now. But what's worse are the lockdowns. In LA, there are still several businesses that are not permitted to operate indoors. We have outdoor gyms, outdoor restaurants, we have outdoor everything. And until recently, California was under a curfew. We couldn't even leave the house between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. each night. And which are the areas in which these draconian measures are ordered? Well, they're all far left states, far left cities. It's Democrats that want to wrap our mouths in cloth and lock us in our homes. And so we're forced to communicate over Twitter, over Facebook, and over Instagram. And we are encouraged to sit and watch YouTube videos all day. The more we're forced to rely on technology to communicate, the more control the tech companies have over us. How long before a Zoom call gets shut down and we're banned from using their service because we said that we believe abortion is wrong? How long before our calls start to drop and our phone service is shut down from Verizon or AT&T because we said that the wage gap is a myth? And look, the one thing that we must have the freedom to say in a free country is that we believe an election is invalid, crooked, stolen. The fact that we're not allowed to say this right now, that videos are demonetized for this, distribution is constricted, people are getting deplatformed even, this censorship means that we are no longer free, ladies and gentlemen. And make no mistake, this is not merely the choice of private companies as leftist apologists would have you believe. Make no mistake, Democrats in the government have been pushing Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and their parent company Google to do this since at least 2016. Now, I'm not going to claim that they've threatened the management of these companies with imprisonment for non-compliance. We've not gotten that far yet. But even a modest collusion between these big tech firms and government officials of a single political party, even modest collusion between these two groups violates the spirit of the First Amendment. But it's far worse than just violating the spirit of the law. These companies are essentially monopolies. Certainly one can use Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or Twitter to communicate, and there are smaller, less popular companies that provide the same services. Parler and Rumble and Gab and whatnot. And perhaps there will eventually be a Facebook killer, a YouTube killer, a Google killer. But here's the problem. If the CEOs of these companies are practicing sketchy, possibly illegal, monopolistic behavior, then there's very little chance other companies can effectively take enough market share to compete with these megaliths. Ordinarily, this kind of corporate criminality would be addressed by the federal government. Antitrust laws might be enforced, or new antitrust legislation might be proposed, and Parler and Rumble and other new social media ventures would be free to compete in a fair marketplace against Facebook, against Twitter, against YouTube, etc. However, if these companies are colluding with one political party to silence the other political party, then it's unlikely that these monopolistic practices will ever be addressed, because it's in the best interest of the Democrats in DC these monopolies retain power. In fact, the best case scenario for Democrats is that Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Google become even stronger, more powerful. Because the more powerful these companies become, the more control they have over the flow of information. And the easier it will be for Democrats to control the news, to hide the truth, and to lie to the public. Now, one argument that's been proposed by some people in government is that social media companies function as utilities. I'm just going to jump to Wikipedia for the definition here. A public utility is an organization that maintains the infrastructure for a public service, often also providing the service using that infrastructure. Public utilities are subject to forms of public control and regulation, ranging from local community-based groups to statewide government monopolies. The term utilities can also refer to a set of services provided by these organizations consumed by the public: coal, electricity, natural gas, water, sewage, telephone, and transportation. Broadband internet services, both fixed line and mobile, are increasingly being included within this definition. Now, what's interesting about these various services is that they are heavily regulated. And the reason these things are heavily regulated is that these services, over time, have proved to be critical to societies. And when these services are not performed properly, things can get messy. In the case of, say, trash collection, if such a company were not regulated to dumping waste in landfills, they might start dumping into rivers or farm fields or around their competitors' offices. Simple but strict regulation is needed to ensure that our trash is dumped in the designated landfill. Now, this is not remotely controversial. Societies need trash removed for matters of public health. It's a simple service that's useful to everyone. So the regulation of this service is universally recognized as necessary. In the case of communication, politicians once recognized the need for people to communicate. Landline phone service is still considered a utility in America, despite the fact that no one, personally, uses landlines anymore. The fact that the phone service has been replaced for many people with online communication services like social media, well, that should mean that the government would want to start looking into whether or not to treat these social media companies as utilities. The fact is that politicians have neglected to foresee how powerful these companies would become. Social media is still a relatively new medium of communication, and yet it's already become the standard for a huge percent of the population. Many people believe that regulations are universally bad things. They believe that the natural course of a capitalist society will eventually shift and settle into a state that's the very best for everyone. But this neglects two things. One, the sinister intent of powerful people, and two, the irrationality of powerful people. As people gain very high levels of power in the market, they can actually become more powerful than the government in terms of curtailing freedoms. This is why a trash collection company isn't permitted to simply refuse to collect the trash of somebody that the CEO doesn't like. You stole this guy's wife? Well, his company can't simply stop collecting your trash. That would be illegal. The only way that most utilities can refuse service is if you neglect to pay for them. Otherwise, they must perform that service. And this is a critical aspect of a utility. Utilities are services that are considered so essential to society that they must be performed. And we must be able to communicate. And in a free society, we must be able to communicate freely. Free expression is the keystone of a free society. And as new forms of communication are adopted by the society, these forms of communication must also remain free. But this has not happened with social media. Ordinarily, regulation serves to curtail a freedom. You're not allowed to develop on this land. You're not allowed to construct a building this high. You can only play music this loud, etc. However, in the case of social media, curtailing the freedoms of a few social media CEOs actually liberates millions of users. As you can see, I'm somewhat personally invested in this particular issue. If you want to help me and other conservatives like me, the best thing that you can do is to make sure that you subscribe and you share my videos. I've noticed that my videos are only distributed to my subscribers now. YouTube doesn't even show my thumbnails on their service anymore to anyone who is not subscribed. I mean, I might be wrong about that. You can let me know, but that's what it looks like from the data I'm getting in my analytics. So if you are seeing this video and you happen to not be subscribed, please do subscribe. All right, well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just they know so much that is not so. Good night.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.